short wheelbase van conversion series. In the last episode we shared with you how we built our kitchen, and in this one we'll be talking through our water, gas and electrics setup. I know this stage of the van build can be really daunting for people, and that is why I'm leaving it to Billy, but do not forget I did do the wiring. Before we started converting vans, Billy did have a little electronics experience, and we also had the guidance of his dad, big up Ian. We also found Nate Murphy's and Van Dog Traveller's ebooks really useful at the get-go, so we will link them down below for you guys to use if you need them. And another website that we found really useful is Tinkercad. It allows you to build electronic circuits online and test them digitally before you do it in the real world. So again, see it all below. I will leave you with Billy now. Enjoy the video.
Right, so the next task is to move on to the water setup. Now the tap that we've got is a monoblock tap that actually has inlets for hot and cold water. Now obviously we don't have hot water in the van, so we need to come up with a solution to allow this to only accept cold water. Now just plugging in one of these points won't work, because as soon as you then turn it to the other side, the water just dribbles out and it'll go all over the floor. Another option would be to block one of these points, but that would mean that, say it's in this position, it might be coming out with cold water, but when you go over to here, it'll block off that port and only allow the other one, and therefore nothing will come through. So the contraption that we've come up with to kind of solve this is this. It's relatively simple. It's just a Y splitter that splits off the cold water that'll come from the pump off into two directions. Now this goes to the tap tails that actually go into the sink. So these have a little threaded end and they just secure into there, and they've got a couple of rubber O-rings that keep that nice and sealed. Now we'll connect this other one, which normally would maybe go into the hot water supply, but we'll be connecting it into this splitter. So both of those inlets are receiving cold water from the water pump. Okay, so now we can show you what our setup is for the water pump and for our freshwater tank. Now what we've got here is a 12-volt submersible pump, which is connected to this pipe, which will basically go up to the Y splitter that's currently set up for the taps. Now we've got this along with the 12-volt cable, which will be going to the 12-volt fuse box eventually, cable tied to the pipe and running through this screw cap. Now with our particular tank that we've got, this screw cap had the capability of adding a little tap, which means that it's got a nice hole pre-cut through the middle of it. So we've not had to cut that out, we've just fed the pipe and the cable through that, which means that at any point when you want to remove it, take it out to refill it, empty it, or anything like that, you just unscrew this, pull out the submersible pump, and then when it's ready to go back in, you can just feed that through so it reaches the bottom of the tank, and then use this screw cap to screw it in place. Now that means that while this is in the van, if you're kind of going over bumpy roads and this is sloshing about, water is unlikely to come out of that little hole, whereas if you didn't have the screw cap or anything like that, there's a chance that because that hole is quite wide, water could come splashing out and go all over the inside of your cupboard. So in order to get this in place, we need to cut this pipe just so it's at the right length to connect up to that Y splitter, and we also need to get these wires extended to go over to the 12-volt fuse box. Then we will have a switch in between where you can turn on the pump and turn it off when you're finished using the tap. Right, so for the electronics, we've got our solar charge controller and 12-volt fuse box mounted to this ply panel. Now this fits nicely in the area that's going to hide the gas and the electronics and everything like that. Before we actually get it mounted, it is connect a few bits with this 12-volt fuse box and the solar charge controller. I'm not sure whether you can see there, but it is now detecting the battery, and it is actually putting charge into the battery. So the battery's full, so it's currently at 13.8 volts. With this solar charge controller, you can use this button here to turn on or off load. So obviously this is connected now and it's live, so we want to turn that off so that that's not working while we connect everything up to this fuse box. Now inside this bottom drawer, as you know, we're having the cool box, and I've also fit another 12 volt socket there, which is going all the way through back here. So we've got a couple of wires there connected up that we also need to get added to that fuse box. So that is fuse box done. Beautiful. We've got a couple of labels that came with this, just pointing out what everything is roughly. So we've got lights at the top, then we've got the fan. It's not override necessarily, but that's the nearest that we had. Accessories for the USB port, water pumps obviously for the water pump, and refrigerator is for the cool box. When we've kind of got everything in place inside this box, we're going to fix this in place. We'll get all the cables tidied up, but before we do that, we want to get the gas box in this section here so that we know exactly how much space we've got to play with. Then we can get the, as I say, the panel fixed in place and the battery fixed down as well. We want to basically get all of the sockets, light switches and monitor and everything like that mounted into a nice place. Now, originally we had all of the wires coming through this one hole, just because we didn't know exactly how we wanted to lay it out until we had the kind of kitchen unit in place. We've got that now, so we've kind of mapped out how we want it to appear, and we've got this little front panel where all of these can kind of secure into, particularly the USB socket and the 12 volt socket. It's basically a threaded shaft, and it's got this little nut, I guess you can call it, that screws on and kind of clamps on the one side. So what we can do with this is poke it through and then put the nut onto the other side, and that'll keep it clamped in place. So we'll have the USB, the 12 volt socket, the little monitor that we've got just to identify battery level, and then we'll have the light switch here. So we'll get this panel all connected up to the wires that we've already got these spade terminals added to. We can get it plugged in and then get it screwed into place to cover up that mess behind it. So with the USB socket and the 12 volt socket, if we just zoom in, you can see next to the terminal on each of them there's a positive and negative indicator. So all you want to do in this case is take the red wire, which we're using as positive, and connect it up to the positive side, and then take the black wire, which we're using as negative, and connect that up with the negative side.
Well, I guess I'll never know.
There we go. Working. So we've got the lights on for the USB. You can't see anything in that, but that is also on. And then you can see the lights coming on with that switch. So that's all working. We'll turn that back off at the charge controller, and we'll get these final screws put in place.
I think my heart probably better off with this little bitty box where the sun don't shine and you can't see all its scars. See, it's a dark.
The last thing that we need to connect up is that 12 volt socket. Now we've got the cable coming out here, and we've actually got an inline fuse attached here. Now this is a 15 amp fuse because that socket is capable of handling 15 amps, but this solar charge controller can only handle 10. Now because we want to have the flexibility to be able to pull maximum current through that socket, because there might be something like a laptop attached, we're going to connect this directly to the positive terminal on the battery there, so that we can get that kind of full potential to that 12 volt socket if we need it. So now, if we turn the solar charge controller load on, you can see that this monitor lights up and it shows us the voltage of the battery. Now it's full and it is getting some solar in at the moment, so it's showing 13.8 volts, which is lovely. But now all of these work. You can see the lights are coming on there, and you can see that the lights are there on the USB port. As I say, this socket goes directly into the battery as opposed to through the solar charge controller. So in order to safely contain our gas bottle, what we want to do is use some of our offcuts of plywood to put together a sealed gas box. So when we've got this box, we'll seal all of the corners and all of the joints so that from the inside it's going to be completely airtight. Now we also want a way to access that from the top so that it can kind of be removed, get your hand in to turn the valve on and off. For example, on the channel tunnel, you need to actually turn the valve off to your gas so that it's not going out to any of your appliances as part of the travel kind of restriction. So we'll get the table saw on and we'll get some of those pieces cut out now. So for the gas box, rather than showing you me making a box, I thought I would just show you it when it's done. So let me plonk you in over here and then we can have a quick look. So you can see at the top it's got these little kind of twizzle toggles. Now this is basically to offer an easy way when it's fixed in place to kind of access and get in through that top panel there. Everything will be inside it and we'll be able to turn off the valve if we need to or whatever else. And this has kind of got sealant, a bead of sealant kind of along these edges, which just help it to make a nice airtight seal when that is on there and then clamped in place using these toggles. Then we've also got a rubber seal that's running around the entire front face here, and what that means is that when we screw in and squish down this front face, it makes that front piece airtight as well. And one last thing to look at, if I just flip this upside down, is all of these joints. So you can see there running along this joint line we've got beads of sealant running all around. Now obviously right now this thing isn't airtight because it's not fixed in place, but when we have got it fixed, these screw holes will kind of seal all around the bottoms, and around this point as well will seal, so that the only non-sealed areas are going to be this top and this front face, which using this seal here and the seal that's running underneath that will keep this nice and airtight. So we're in the van and we're just working on the gas. Now I've got these little plastic drop vents which we're going to use to run through the floor inside the gas box. Now that means that we can seal up the gas box, and if there is any gas leak around the cylinder itself, that gas can naturally, you know, fall to the ground and flow out of this little vent. Now it's difficult to show you because it's such a small space, but I'll just show what we've just done. So right there you can see a 50mm hole which is running all the way through the van. You can see the floor there. Now this is the right size to fit this little vent, so that'll go there, and we'll put a couple of screws in it just to keep it fixed down, and we'll also put a bit of mesh on the bottom because these holes are quite big. You know, insects will be able to get in there. Now we used this 51mm hole saw, which is a HSS hole saw, which means that it can cut through metal as well, because it's got to cut through the bottom section of the van, which is obviously steel.
See the day for everything it could be. Stop treading on that snooze button. Run. Open your eyes and see everything it was.
So we've got the gas pretty much done. The only thing that we can't do right now is actually test these connections and get some gas into the cylinder. Obviously isolation's going on at the minute, so we can't take this van to the petrol station and fill up the LPG tank. But just to show you where we're at right now, we've got the cylinder in place, all the connections are hooked up, we've got this front panel fixed in place as well, so that'll be nice and airtight. And the last thing that we would do is put this little panel on, pull these toggles around, and that'll clamp it down and make the whole thing airtight. Now the only thing that our LPG tank is going to be powering is this gas hob, which is all hooked up, it's all ready to go. So other than testing it all, gas is pretty much done.
So that is a wrap on today's video. If you liked it, please give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe. If you've got any questions at all about water, gas and electrics, please feel free to drop us a message in the comments below. We're always happy to help. In our next episode, we will be sharing with you how we build this storage unit, which is my little project. I'm not that useless after all. So yeah, thanks a million for watching and see you soon.